Because when you started talking about economics, my next question to you was, well, did any of that transfer to flight training? But now that you're talking, I'm like, it's all about flight training because it's human decisions.
Yeah.
It's
Every
human
decision.
decisions.
Well, risk management.
Yeah.
So economics is to money, same kind of decisions, but risk management, okay, coming home from Hawthorne. Okay, I can go draw a straight line from Hawthorne to Deer Valley, or I can zigzag around and follow the Interstate 10. Now, during the day, if I draw a straight line, I'll get there faster. But I'm accepting some risk that, I only got the one engine, it quits, I got to have a place to put it. So, but during the day, I can see dry lake beds, roads, clear areas, again, save myself first, and then if I can, save the aircraft. So as long as I can find an open place that I can land at a slow speed, I'm going to live. At night, different problem altogether. So it'd be good to be near a road and fly airport to airport to airport, connect the dots. That way I always have a place to land. So I'm managing that risk. During the day, it's worth it. Economic decision, I'll go straight. Less time, less gas, and I'll still survive that route.
Right.
At night, now it's too risky. I won't accept that risk. So I will accept the extra cost of flying over the I-10, connecting the dots, and even if I do, engine fails, I can't reach an airfield, I'll land near the I-10 where emergency vehicles can get to me faster than the search and rescue the next day to find me bled out.
In the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I love it. You mentioned risk management. Let's talk a little bit about that. From your personal take, risk management, how and why is it so vital for someone listening to this who doesn't fly airplanes? It's not a term discussed when it comes to driving cars, like just day to day.
It should be.
It should be.
Yeah.
But it's really not something that I came across or heard much of until I started flight training. Whether that's good or bad is a different topic. Why, for anyone listening or curious, why is risk management, and I think you alluded to it a little bit, such a big thing when it comes to being a pilot and flying airplanes?
And it's interesting the way the FAA has structured everything. Like sport pilot, you can take yourself out and one other person. 2 people, right? If you're a sport pilot rating.
Oh, I can only take one person.
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know that.
Limited to 2-person aircraft, smaller. So if it crashes into a house, it won't cause as much damage.
Just 2
it's
of
a
us.
maximum weight. I think it's 1320 pounds. So as you graduate to more capable aircraft and can carry more people, now you've got to manage more risk because you're not just managing the risk for yourself, you're managing the risk for everybody on board. So the FAA, apparently they don't care too much if you hurt yourself because you can go fly an ultralight with no N number on your own. There's still an FAR that governs it, but, you can do that willy-nilly all yourself. But once you start putting other people at risk, now they want to control it more, and they want you to have a higher, more training and a higher level of proficiency, like the 90-day thing. 90 days, let's face it, that's too long between landings anyway.
I'm with you.
But they've got a minimum. They've got a standard. But you can go a whole year and not have touched an airplane and go get yourself current with 3 landings. So they're okay with you hurting yourself, but once you can hurt somebody else, they want to manage that risk. So, yeah, you didn't hear about it in cars or even on your bicycle, but think about the things people do to manage risk on a bicycle. Well, you get a helmet. And, if skateboard, you put the wrist protectors on so you don't bust a wrist. So you take steps to mitigate the risk because you go, well, on a skateboard, yeah, there's a good chance I'll fall down, and maybe I'll put knee protectors on and maybe butt pads. I watch snowboarders. They're on their butt a lot, snowboarders. And so sometimes that's got to hurt. So they take steps to mitigate the risk, even though they're not, they didn't do a checklist, the risk management checklist. But we in aviation, we're used to checklists. And so you can run a risk assessment tool. So, or I think I've heard FRAT now, flight risk assessment tool, because maybe other endeavors are starting to use. Maybe there's a boat risk assessment tool. That would be a BRAT.
Right. A BRAT. That's funny.
But regardless, then you're doing a formal process. And I've seen people do this all the time. They start scoring their risk. Is it night? Is there weather? Is the runway wet? And so they're scoring it, and then they don't like the number at the bottom, so they change some of these. Well, that's not particularly useful. But at least the process makes them aware of the additional risk factors that they've incurred. They go, hey, according to this thing, we shouldn't go fly. Maybe we ought to think about this.
Right.
Now, that's something before using paper tools like that or checklists. And I've seen students do this, is they'll call me and they'll say, oh, I hear that it's going to be really windy this afternoon. Maybe we shouldn't fly. And I'm like, well, it's calm right now. I go, it might pick up, but then we could just land. I go, if we're in the pattern. So I am more of the mind that I'll always show up at the airport, and then I'll stand on the ramp and look around. And I'll go, is it windy? Is this, can we mitigate this risk somehow?
Right.
Is there a perpendicular runway that's into the wind that we could use? And so once we've gone through, what do we want to do? What's our objective? And then I go, okay, how can we mitigate any risks that we have? If it makes sense, then we'll do it. And some things are variable. It's not an all or nothing. A cross country tends to be because you're going somewhere. So you have to assess that risk for the en route weather. But I go, okay, if I run into it and it's worse than I thought, can I land somewhere and stop?
Right.
And always land. I go, okay, nope, it's not nice yet. So we'll land here, get a cup of coffee, meet some nice people. There may be some good things come out of it, and then get back in. If you got time pressure, now that's another risk. They get their itis.
Right.
So, and that's where having a backup plan like an airline flight or a car would make sense. As part of your overall risk plan is if it gets bad, I can land in Palm Springs and I could take a Southwest flight to Phoenix.
Right.
Or, Uber the rest of the way.
Right.
Park the plane, I'll pay the money, because it's funny how people make decisions, I got to get there. I don't want to pay for overnight parking. I'm like, paying for overnight parking will be a lot cheaper than the funeral ceremony. That's
100%.
And in hindsight, that's clear. But so you got to actually, and I do this all the time, is you probably do too, is I read the accident report. Is when I'm about to do something, I go, okay, what's this accident report going to read like? And then when I realize they're pointing out things that I've already done or am about to do as increasing the risk as additive conditions or potentially causes of the accident, I go, okay, no, we're not going to do it.
I love that. I've never heard someone put it that way. So when you're about to embark on something that might be on the fence, you visualize and try and imagine what your own accident report might read. And if you're not 100% happy with the details, you say no.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't want that. I don't want anyone to write that about me. You go that because how many times do you read accident reports? You read them all the time, right?
Right.
And you go, what a dumbass. You go, oh, look at they did that, and then, but you don't know the circumstances under which they did it. They went down the primrose path. They got led down that path, so it's hard to you put yourself in their shoes, and I can see how they get from one step to the next step to the next step. And I go, I could do that because let's face it, they were human. I'm a human. Any of us could fall for all the little tricks, and that's the accident chain, right? We could have broken the chain at any one of those spots. So, and here's another one. We were flying helicopters in Scottsdale, and Arizona gets thunderstorms in the summer.
Right.
So,
what is it? Buoys?
Haboob.
Haboob.
It comes from somewhere in the Middle East, but it'll create these huge dust storms.
Yes.
So the collapsing thunderstorms will whip up all the dust off the desert floor, and it becomes a wall of dust coming at you. And the visibility goes down, the winds get strong and unpredictable. So there was a thunderstorm off in the distance, a couple of them, and me and another guy were both older, and I think we were working on my commercial rating, and we looked at each other, and we went, I don't think we need to go fly. And what was funny was we stayed on the ground and we did ground. We hopped in the helicopter, moved all the controls. We did all the emergencies. So we simulated, everything you could that would require, moving some switches from memory.
Right.
So you build a little muscle memory. So that was useful too.
Right.
One guy, he did go out and fly, but he and I were both in our 50s, and he flew Apache helicopters in the Army, and I flew A-10s in the Air Force, and we were both in the Gulf War together at King Fahd Air Base. And which is really an international airport, but when we were there, it was an air base. Anyway, we looked at each other and went, yeah, we could fly, but there are so many beautiful, perfect flying days in Arizona that why would we choose this one to go fly?
Right.
I go, we can wait and fly another day. Now, if the weather's always like that, like you live in Kansas and there's all kinds of wind and weather going on all the time, then that might be actually an okay day. You're like, well, this is the best it gets. so we'll go ahead and fly, but we'll mitigate the risk some other way. Like we won't fly east because that's where the thunderstorms are. We'll fly west and then north. But they can pop up anywhere and move quickly. And when we looked at the day afterwards, like after the fact, we go, okay, we could have flown, because that's a disappointing one. But if that same day and same set of circumstances happened 100 times, there might be 8 times that it wouldn't have been okay. Whereas on the next day when it's beautiful and clear and there are no thunderstorms, we could do that 100 times and it would have been fine all 100 times.
Right.
So why accept a 8 in 100 chance of having a problem when you can have 0? Right. So we chose 0 on that particular day, and that was definitely the right decision because it was good for us.
Yeah, and you'd rather, look back and say we could have done it than not have the ability to look back.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's...
So that's, risk assessment. And then there's another thing called risk and resource management, is that RRM, so you have risks, but you also have resources. So you can mitigate some of the risks. Like some of the simplest ways we do that are filing a flight plan. So if you go cross-country over, uninhabited terrain, there's a risk that even if you just land at, engine fails and you do a forced landing and the airplane is not flyable anymore and you're by yourself, you can be where there's no cell phone coverage.
Right.
People rely on the cell phone. It's not a satellite phone. It's a cell phone. You land in the middle of nowhere. There are parts of northern Arizona where there's no coverage.
Right.
And you can't reach anybody. And there's going to be a time factor. Whereas if you filed a flight plan, there's a time that they're expecting you to close that flight plan. And then for a half an hour, they initiate a phone search. They start looking for you. They call the place you took off. They call the place you're supposed to land. They talk to flight service in the middle. Did he talk to anybody? And then they go, okay, we know he made it at least to here. So that'll narrow the search area.
Right.
And they'll start looking sooner. Whereas if you just show up missing, the first person that, say you're flying home and your wife's expecting you, oh, he just got delayed and he's late. So she'll sleep through the night, wake up the next morning wondering where you were, start making phone calls and get panicky. Then it's going to take a while before they realize, okay, he flew and is missing somewhere between point A and point B. So you've just delayed that search. Whereas, say you're injured and it's a time-critical injury, you could have had somebody looking for you hours, maybe a day sooner.
Right.
And that may be the difference. So that's a risk mitigation tool, is because the ultimate risk is dying.
Right.
So you could mitigate that risk somewhat by filing a flight plan.
Risk and resource management. I love it. And like flight following would be a resource.
That's a resource.
Yeah.
So, and all the ATC, well, just getting flight following on your flight.
Right.
That's a resource.
Right.
So single engine from here to Hawthorne, I run the risk of I could have an engine failure or some kind of in-flight problem. Well, if I'm already talking to ATC, think how it delays you if you've got to look up a frequency and tune it in and then get in touch with them. If I'm already talking to them, I can just say, hey, LA Center, I'm having some engine roughness. I am going to divert into thermal, and it's easy now. And so I can deal with the problem, because the chances are if you're having an engine problem, you're going to deal with the engine problem first, but nobody knows you're having that problem now. Then you got to do all this coordination, whereas I can use this resource that I have. Hey, do you have the CTAF freak for thermal? Yeah, 122.8. And then poof, you go there. Hey, clear the pattern. I'm coming in on this runway and land.
Love it.
Or say if it's a towered airport, that even needs to grease the skids more. I'm going to land at Palm Springs. There's airliners and a lot of traffic, jets going into there, and I'm now having an emergency where I'm pointing right at it. I can go past, Palm Springs without talking to anybody, but I know there's a lot of air traffic, so that's a risk, and I mitigate it by doing flight following because they call out the other traffic to me. Okay? And then if I need to divert in there, I'm already talking to somebody. They'll hand me off to the tower, and the tower will say you're clear to land on any runway.
Love
Poof, land. So you can mitigate some of your risks by using additional resources around you.
I love that. And so that, I guess, to my question of why it seems so much more talked about in aviation is because I guess in aviation, unlike other things, the opportunity or the instances in which you have to mitigate risks come up so much more often than riding a bicycle, where maybe you decide to put a helmet on or off. In planes, it's every minute of every single flight. Potentially I could have the need to make some decisions and mitigate some risk.
And the risk is greater.
Right.
So engine failure in a car, we just pull over.
Right.
Engine failure in an airplane, you've got more problems to solve. So
Right.
it's a lot more consequential, and the risk of dying. Now, you could die on the highway. People do it every day.
Right.
They're listening to the radio, they're texting and driving. They don't even realize, they're totally unaware of the amount of risk they're accepting when they get in their car.
Totally.
But it's funny, when people get in a plane, they're all wary, like they've got to be cautious because airplane accidents make the news. Car accidents never make the news.
Car accident reports.
No, there's no such thing.
I love it.
So when people get in their car willy-nilly, they don't put on their seatbelt, or they don't even think about it. But
Right.
airplane, because of the media, it gets more attention.
Right.
But, that's good, though.
It's a good
It
thing.
should spill over into the rest of the world.
Totally.